And so I was like, screw it, let's start a company.
Pro tip, if you're trying to get connected to the FBI, just search how to make explosives.
It's not if, it's when you blow yourself up. So I was like, I'll do something else. Why did you ask that founder that? They want to hear the story and they want to feel the why. It's not always purely analytical. It's really hard to be a CEO. Not many people can do it, but it's a path towards a whole lot of money. So a lot of people try. There is a desire, a hunger in Dallas. You'll have a 5-minute conversation. They'll say, oh, you need to meet this person. I'll connect you. And then they actually do. We love angel investors. Very few deals make it past this kind of scrutiny.
Welcome to the Diligent Observer from PitchFact. I'm your host, Andrew, and every week I share insights and strategies to help angel investors make better bets. My guest today is Mike Wilkes, a Marine Corps veteran who now manages McKinney Economic Development Corporation's Innovation Fund, providing up to $500,000 in non-dilutive capital to tech startups. We explore McKinney's innovative approach to economic development, lessons from his time leading the North Texas Angel Network, and what makes startups truly investable beyond just the numbers. I hope you enjoy learning from Mike as much as I did.
Mike, thanks for being with me today.
Hey, good morning, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
So, Mike, I'd love if you could talk a little bit about your story, just to start out. Like, who are you? What's your background? And how did you get to the seat that you're in today?
Yeah, happy to. First off, proud Texas Aggie, right? Whoop. There we go. That's, of course, where we met was at A&M. I grew up here in DFW, graduated from Plano West, and then went to Arkansas for a year for college, and just felt like I could be doing more with my time. And so decided to do a little pivot myself, and I went and joined the Marines and was there for about 4 years and a few deployments, and I was a squad leader there. And got out and then went to Texas A&M. That's really where I got my foothold in the whole entrepreneurship, innovation kind of scene, where I just had a lot of time on my hands. And so I was like, well, I am familiar with the concept of entrepreneurship. I have no idea what it actually is or what it means. And so I was like, screw it, let's start a company. And hunting season was coming out and nobody could get ammunition. I did a little bit of research. It was these primers in each round that there was a shortage of. There's a bottleneck in production. There were no regional suppliers for these primers and manufacturers. So that was my niche, and I was going to be the Texas regional supplier, and then everyone could get their ammo and go hunting and do what they wanted to do. So I ran with that business for about 9 months before I realized that I wouldn't have made any money for a long, long time. There's a pretty good reason there's no regional suppliers. There's some high barriers to entry. It was a super cool crowd that would go to the McFerrin Center and they'd go to these night classes and get involved. Yeah, I learned a lot, and it was fun along the way, where like me, as I went in as a sophomore, I was meeting with fire marshals and pitch competitions. I was like, this is cool.
What's something about the primer industry that most people don't know?
It hasn't changed much in 20 plus years. So you can use expired patents to make primers, and every 6 to 8 years, there's a scare in politics or a global pandemic or something consistently every 6 to 8 years to where people are screaming and there's a shortage. So there's demand spikes. It can get alleviated. But what I was doing, I wasn't doing anything new. I was just like, I'd be the cost-effective option. It was my kind of competitive stance, and be the regional supplier to keep supply low as I started out. But you can just use expired patents.
And what does the startup cost? Like as you got into it, you learned that, oh, wow, this is harder than it sounds. What made it so difficult?
The cost of the machinery, labor, and facility and training came out to be $8 million. There was one There was one company in Belgium that made the machines, and they didn't really have any competitors. So it was like, you want to do this, you go through them. So I had some calls with them. They were giving me the rundown, but there was STTR that I was applying to, one of the grant programs with the federal government. And they had, during the pandemic, raised the cap on this grant program from, I think, 5 or 5.5 mil to up to 6.5 mil. So I had to raise 10% of that. So if I could raise 650K to then secure this grant for 6.5 mil, I still wouldn't have enough money. And I had no idea how to raise 600. And looking back, that would have been a bad investment. It turned out that before I put a bunch of money into it, the numbers didn't make sense, and we took it as a learning experience.
Okay, so what happened next?
Also, one more thing on that, it was also manufacturing high explosives. So I was getting ATF license and all that. And the FBI ended up tracking my IP address down one time. That was funny. It all went.
You got swatted?
I thought no, it was just like a couple special agents. Like, what's the deal with this search history, man?
Pro tip, if you're trying to get connected to the FBI, just search how to make explosives.
There's this chemical part because the firing pin will hit the primer and cause a little spark, and the spark ignites the gunpowder. And so when you're doing, 60,000 primers an hour, you've got a mound of this really sensitive chemical compound. And everybody that I was doing research talking to was like, it's not if, it's when you blow yourself up. So I was like, I'll do something else. I like all my fingers and toes and such. After that, the McFerrin Center actually asked me, they had this entrepreneurial boot camp for veterans cohort coming up. And they asked me to be a mentor because I went to a lot of their night classes and things like that. I was like, really? Me? One failed startup under my belt? You want me to be a mentor? They were like, just tell them what they shouldn't do. And it turned out to be very early, very ideation stage, where they were just like, yeah, I think this would be a cool business. What should I do? And so I had incorporated and I had done some of the early stuff. And so I really enjoyed that experience and felt like I was being helpful. And that was great. And I still am a mentor with some of the groups around here, and I really enjoy it. But I got into the mentorship, and then I got connected with the Dallas Entrepreneurship Center, now the DEC Networks. And they do some great work, but they do also put on Dallas Startup Week. And so I was going to be their veterans track captain for that summer at 22. That was like my summer gig. As I was doing that, the director of the North Texas Angel Network, who they're partnered with, he had a cool opportunity with a startup, and so he went and joined, but that left a gap, a vacancy in the Angel Network. And that's a pretty serious position to fill. So they needed some time, and I volunteered myself. I'm like, hey, I can step in. I'm here for the summer anyways. I can step in, buy you a few months, and you can find a permanent director. It's now Jeff Murphy, and they've been making deals and writing checks, and it's really been going well, really growing as an angel network. They're at like 60 people now. That was a unique environment where I was really able to learn a lot. I was trying to be a sponge because we had maybe when I started 40 or so angel investors in the network. They were very helpful. They were happy to answer questions when I asked them, like, hey, after a call, hey, can you stay on for a sec? Why did you ask that founder that? You have a few hundred of those calls and you start to put it together, and it's like, okay, this is what across all these different perspectives, investors start to look for in companies. This is what makes a company investable. And that was essentially my job as the interim director. I was tasked with getting more members, more sponsors, but then also bringing better and better deals to the network so that they could continue to put money into the community and get a return. I really spent some time learning what the investors want, and then would just go out and try to find it.
What stood out to you during that season of learning what investors look for? What surprised you that you didn't expect?
It was the emotional aspect of it. which took me a little bit off guard or just caught me by surprise. I didn't think that would be consideration when they make an investment. But it really is this emotional connection of how closely the founder is tied with the problem. They want to hear the story and they want to feel the why. And it's not always purely analytical. Being in the Marines, you're pretty analytical. There's cause effect and you structure things that way. That surprised me. If they get maybe a great pitch, here's this great company, here's the great market opportunity, here's the money you're going to make if you invest in my company. But they would always drive for a story, or there would be just a tremendous impact on if they started out with a really powerful story. And so that made me appreciate the soft side, you can call it, like the soft skills and all of that, where like it's really hard to drive a company. You're doing 16 things at once. I think I'm doing a lot of things at once. Then I'll look at these founders and they're doing even more. But it's that emotional tie-in that can fill the gaps, that can say, this is a projection, but here's how I'm going to get to it because here's how invested I am in my own company. A founder can say, oh yeah, I put 300K in myself for friends and family round, and that's really great. But then they also want to hear the story. They want to hear why. And that was really interesting.
So would you say that is a form of team due diligence that an investor is subconsciously doing because they recognize that at its infancy, starting a company is just freaking hard. And so you have to be fundamentally like bought in. Otherwise, you're going to give up. Is that the motivation, you think, as to why this emotional connection is so important for investors?
That's part of it. And then kind of the philosophy I take in now is an early stage company will always have gaps. Their financial projections could be incredibly sophisticated or could be just based on hopes and dreams. You don't know. It could be a formula and, oh, look, we're going to be a $250 million company year 5. That's every single financial projection. So what's the difference? Or how can you tell the real from the fake? And so there's always going to be gaps in early stage companies, and early stage investors take on the risk because of the higher chance for reward. It is riskier. You can get more money than if you waited to a Series B. The founder can fill in those gaps, or the team can fill in those gaps where maybe they've got a pretty good go-to-market strategy, but maybe you're like, will it really work? I don't know. And then you meet the team and you meet the advisors that they say are going to make these introductions. You can start to piece it together. And so if you've got just a rock star founder that's really bought in, then that can fill in some of those gaps.
So how did that shape or change the way you went about vetting deals and selecting opportunities? Like, as you were learning this, how did you respond or evolve your approach?
I would try to get to know the founder. The first call that we would have would generally be a pretty relaxed call. It's very encouraging for them to go on anecdote and share because you want to see, you're analyzing everything. What are they doing? When are they shifting their weight? All of the things. How are they blinking fast when they say certain things? That's your job. You're sitting there, you're trying to analyze all of this. At the same time, you got to open it up to go on tangents, tell me a story, because you want to get to know the actual person. I think that relationships are built on trust. And so the old Japanese saying where you have your work mask, your family mask, and your friend's mask, if you're wearing a work mask and you're not yourself, well, then how can you possibly hope to build a relationship on trust? I have adopted that, and I try to get the founders just to open up and just let's have an honest conversation. And then through that, you can see if they're bought in. You can see when they start to talk fast and get passionate about something. That's now in our process. That's an entire 45-minute meeting is just that the founder, the founding team, we're just talking it out. What's the vision for this company? Super high level questions. You're not necessarily measuring their responses to their questions. You're measuring how bought in they are. You're measuring if they're passionate, if they truly know the industry that they're operating in. Can they sell their company? Now, like I said, it's really hard to be a CEO. Not many people can do it, but it's a path towards a whole lot of money. So a lot of people try. But finding the person who can really, when it gets down, that's what people try to do at least. There's no formula or cure that can measure grit, but you try to.
Well, I love the focus on nonverbal cues. What do they say? Like 60% of communication is nonverbal. Maybe it's more than that. Some huge percentage of communication is nonverbal. And so it's fascinating that you guys pay so much attention to that. Okay, so you were learning all this at North Texas Angel Network during school after completing your service. What happened after you graduated? How did you transition? And then what are you doing now?
The position I'm in now is project manager for the McKinney Economic Development Corporation. And I oversee our innovation fund, where we ourselves give out of our budget 50 up to 200K for early stage companies in a grant in non-dilutive capital. And then they come to McKinney, they headquarter here, and they create jobs. It's essentially a model of economic development. It's very proprietary. We're the only ones doing it now. How I got into this position was they were growing and evolving. As this fund grew, so did the demand. And so they needed a dedicated person to manage the fund. Again, I get to meet cool people, travel every now and then, go to these conferences and bring better and better deals to McKinney.
Say more about how this innovation fund is so unique. It sounds like a fund, but it's not dilutive, and your objective is not necessarily dollar return, but job creation. How does that influence your diligence process as you guys are vetting these opportunities?
What we look for in deals is very comparable to a VC network and angel networks and their scope. And you might compare that to the federal funding program scope, STTR, SBIR, and SBA programs. They have generally a different focus. So there are some government programs that might do a matching with SBIR or something like that. That's not really us. We follow that scope so that we can syndicate deals to the investors in the community. We can share deals, drive deal flow for ourselves, and so forth. So we look at 12 things in the company during the screening and due diligence process that can take 2 to 3 months. We try to be very efficient with the process because you got to think it's the first time that oftentimes these founders are applying to government, right? So they need to know that, yes, a government can indeed move efficiently, be fast, respond to emails in a timely manner, these kinds of things, or else they might be turned away from the opportunity. So we've got a part to play ourselves here in being efficient. And we've really got that down. Our fund has 46 portfolio companies now, largely in AI-enabled solutions, B2B SaaS, fintechs, some med techs, almost reaching its 5th year. It's really ironed out at this point. We've got a set process. And so the 12 things that we look at on each company is the founder, and we spread it over about 3 screening calls with research and such in the back end. But we're able to make these calls efficiently if they bring all the documents. So when we're having the financial call, they've got their projections, they've got their balance sheet. We talk through that. And so it's bringing information to light and verification at the same time. And then on the back end, you go and verify again. So it's the founder, the founding team, the company vision, and the hiring strategy. And that's a little bit unique to us. We want local job creation. And then we learn about what's the problem, what's the size, the scope of the problem, how much do you know about the problem? Is your ideal customer profile truly who you're selling to, or is it the end user? Because the person who you left a big company to solve this problem, but that may not be who you're actually selling to as a decision maker. Identifying things like that. What is the solution? We see a demonstration. We see the functionality. We go through the users. If it's a B2C solution and let's say it's a marketplace and they've got 50,000 users, but only 5 daily transactions, well, that's an indicator for, okay, maybe there's ghost profiles. Then we look at the market and the competition. What's the size of the market? What is the go-to-market strategy? And who are the other players? Direct and what's commonly missed, indirect substitutes, things that people are using now. We might have this great solution that can save you a lot of time, but if it's not enticing enough for everyone to get off Microsoft Excel, then that's going to throw a wrench in the go-to-market.
It sounds like a pretty thorough diligence process, just like any venture fund might run on a deal. Is that right?
Pretty much. And it's great if they can share like due diligence packets, or we'll share ours. We got, maybe a 60 or 80 page due diligence packet, and we'll share that with others just to make the deals go quicker. And then finally, how has the company been funded? How will it be funded? Fundraising strategy. Look at the cap table, look at financial projections, walk through them, see if they're based on hopes and dreams or if they're based on actual customer pipeline. We want to see that expenses tie with job creation figures. And then traction. Over the last 12 months, how fast has this company grown? That's an indicator for hustle, speed. At the end of the day, goal setting. If their goal is to 2x revenue this year, that's a great goal. For that case, it could be really great. Another founder could say, we're going to 8x revenue this year. It's a higher goal. And then you look at the traction to see if they can achieve it. That's pretty much the 12 things that we look for in each company. This is taxpayer money that we're using. So we got to make sure that it's the best possible use of taxpayer money.
So say more about the broad strategy. I think this is really unique model. Like you mentioned this, but I want to make sure that we have a good understanding of how unique this is. Like, what is the strategy here? There's just this big pot of money that the city of McKinney has set aside to incentivize job creation through investment in these entrepreneurs. It's not technically investment. It's a grant in exchange for these job creation targets. So say more about what makes that so special and distinct.
So what makes it special is we offer upfront capital. Governments just don't do that. We understand that there's a necessity. If we truly want to incentivize these companies to headquarter here, there has to be an upfront portion. There's moving costs. They're raising it around actively so it can go to burn rate or overhead. That's how we structure our deals. It's generally 50% upfront and 50% performance-based over 3 years. And so our strategy here is let's get a company here for a 3-year agreement, making a bet that they will like the city, continue to stay here after the agreement, and continue to grow and create jobs while being supported by us. So what we do to achieve that is we build relationships and we do portfolio support. We try to create our own luck a little bit. One of the reasons that we partnered with Plug and Play is because they're really, really good at connecting these corporations with the startups, vice versa. At the beginning of the year, going into last year as well, a lot of what we do is feedback driven from our founders. Our founders are telling us, hey, it would be great if XYZ resource was available for us. And we're like, great, let's see if we can get a resource like that. And so on this portfolio support initiative, we want to, whatever shape and size it comes in, help our companies drive revenue, drive customer acquisition. They could be marketing, press release, whatever, but they were coming to us, and a lot of it was access to these corporations. And we've got the corporation relationships with our workforce director and our business retention director. And so we can do a little bit of that, and we can connect to some local organizations, VCs that we have relationships with, but we don't intimately know Sequoia Ventures. We don't have offices in Barcelona and Japan. And the most importantly, we don't have the corporate network that they do. So we looked at some options of, okay, who fits our model, who can not just support the startups, but also put McKinney on the map globally as being an innovation player. And Plug and Play was the answer for that. They came in and launched in March of this year. That was actually their first dual city partnership. So McKinney, we've got our innovation fund. Frisco, Texas is also in the innovation game. They've got a lot of sports tech and AI wearables and things like that because they have such a large sports presence. And so that's what they partnered with Plug and Play on as well. And as both cities, and our vertical was enterprise and AI, fitting our B2B SaaS cybersecurity kind of thesis. That fit into ours, and both cities were talking. And Plug and Play ended up launching the North Texas fintech vertical that's shared and partnered on by both the cities. That was a big deal for our cities. It's been going really well. It's really rewarding to see on the corporate side as well, their buy-in and their investment into these programs and these startups. So yeah, nothing but good things to say about the partnership. They're helping our startups out, which helps create jobs here locally.
So, Mike, North Texas is kind of a sleeper community, I would say. When you think about the macro startup ecosystem, people think Texas and it's Austin is the first thought. What are some of the things that you've learned about the North Texas entrepreneurial ecosystem during this season that we should know about?
I think that there is a desire and a hunger in Dallas because we're not Austin, Silicon Valley, Boston, New York. We're trying to be. We're building our way. You'll see us on the top 10 reports pretty often, DFW Metro, but we're not top 3. We're not top 5. I think we're like 8 in dollars funded or something. And we're pretty good at early stage funding. We've got angel networks. We've got great organizations. Plug and Play's in town now. Health Wildcatters, Techstars, those are some great early stage support organizations that help these companies. And so there's a hunger to help, right? There was a gentleman, Greg Head, and he's big software. He's got this thing, Greg's List, and he's just a really smart guy plugged into DFW. He was saying, I asked him, I was like, so what is the difference of the Silicon Valley ecosystem between here? He said that in Silicon Valley, you might wear a hat that says, ask me about my startup. And you go to a cafe and people will go up to you and ask you about your startup. You'll have a 5-minute conversation. They'll say, oh, you need to meet this person. I'll connect you. And then they actually do. And so sometimes all it can be is just taking 5 minutes and actually helping. You're not getting anything out of it, but you connect A to B because you think these people should talk. So there's the early stage, there's people that are working on this, but I'd say the gap right now is on the Series C, Series B funding opportunities, where generally those companies, and even in our portfolio, when they get to that point, we don't mind, fly to California, raise your money, and then come back where you don't have to pay the taxes, right? But if we truly want to make everything homegrown, I think that those slightly later stage funding opportunities is the next step for our growth.
So, Mike, how have you seen angels effectively come alongside you all as this ecosystem is growing?
We love angel investors. We invite North Texas Angels to all of our events. Of course, I used to work for their current director, so we've got a great relationship. I think really highly of what Jeff is doing. They're writing checks. They're making it happen. And so you've got North Texas Angels. You've got some other angel networks that are coming up. Horned Frog Angel Investment Network, I believe. Angel investors play a huge role, not only as investors, but also mentors, because they have so much experience and the founders need it. Not always, not with every single thing, but the wealth of experience that these angel investors offer or can offer, if they want to just spend an hour every 2 weeks and talk, or let me get a board seat because I think you need a little bit help steering this. Angel investors can just truly make a company and their seed and even up to their A round just a lot easier or maybe even faster, especially if you get a big name strategic. One of our companies, Mark Cuban Foundation, is an investor. He's probably one of the most well-known angel investors out there, but he gets in the trenches and he helps his companies. And so that's a little bit, you can create your own luck. The more you plug these companies into your networks, the better off they'll be.
Any advice for angels that are trying to come alongside their local EDC, like let's say outside of DFW? How do they get to know their EDC, find out what's important to them? And obviously not every EDC is like as heavily leaning into startups as you guys are, but any thoughts on just general advice for angels looking to get more plugged in locally?
With EDC is, it relates to what's the goals of the city and then what can we use our budget and provide resources and incentivize. And so each city, just like you said, has a different goal, and therefore each EDC has a different, call it, target. So we're public. We've got offices. You can just walk right in. We're also out and about. I can't guarantee we'll be here. Maybe set a meeting first, but call your EDC, set up a 30-minute meeting and say, what are your innovation goals? And then how are you getting there? Because we've got our fund. Frisco's got startup incentive programs as well. They've got their sauce, but it's not just the two. It's Arlington has innovation goals, and Dallas and Plano. And a lot of these, it's just what flavor is it? And so you can just pick up the phone, Google X City EDC, and call them up and schedule a meeting with their VP or something and find out what it is. But I would say to truly get plugged into the local ecosystem, EDCs are great. Check out angel networks. And I'll tell you why, because some people would join the North Texas Angel Network as we just exited a company and now we're looking at becoming angel investors and we just want to learn a lot, right? Maybe I don't want to invest in any deals these first few months, but I want to learn from the other investors. And so there's a community aspect. They might be once a month or maybe quarterly, but they'll have the pitches. Then once the 4 to 6, call it, pitches are over, they'll ask the founders to just leave the room for about 20 minutes, and they have what's called investor deliberation. This is truly open and honest about what they thought, maybe 5 or so minutes per company, and they talk about it. And if you get a health tech company, then you get some members that have gone through the FDA process themselves, and they can add a lot of insight onto these deals. So when you get 40 or so people in a room, very few deals make it past this kind of scrutiny. So I would say to the founders, see if you can have a champion in that room, somebody in the angel network who knows your company, who wants it to succeed, and then they can help fill in the gaps or answer some of the questions that come up. But when you have this diversity of perspectives, you really get a holistic look at the company. And different things resonated with different people. And so if a company makes it through, that's generally a very investable company. And so during these deliberations, I would learn so much. The kind of newer and angel investors would learn a tremendous amount. Again, it's the diversity of perspectives that can really make deal vetting effective.
So Mike, last question for you. What are some of the trends that you're seeing your founders struggle with that are working in the AI space right now? It sounds like you have a pretty heavy concentration in B2B SaaS, AI applications in your current portfolio. What are some of the things that you guys are seeing your founders really wrestle with?
Well, it can be hiring top-level talent. That's a frequent one, because when you look at hiring a CTO, there's truly a lot that goes into that. And so we are even a resource for our companies on that with our workforce director. And we're good at the apprenticeship programs, the internships, the entry-level positions, maybe mid-level. But when you get to the senior level positions, there's a specific profile that you're looking for that you really have to decide what's best. So workforce, big companies or small companies, that's always in demand, and we're making programs with all of that. Market access, long sales cycles for corporations, those are unfortunately not going away anytime soon.
AI hasn't fixed that yet.
They haven't fixed that yet. But, then you get companies like IBM where just in a few short months, they're getting involved with these companies. So they seem like they've really got it down. It varies. It's just so case by case. The big thing for us at the beginning of the year and last year was market access. We've got so many B2B SaaS and AI solutions. You name it, there's always problems. But when you get the right founder, they just manage to find a way around them. They find a solution.
Love it. Well, Mike, this has been a blast. Thank you so much for joining me today and for the work that you're doing at McKinney EDC. Thank you also for your service. It's been an honor to get to know you over the last few years, and I look forward to our next meeting.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Andrew. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Diligent Observer. I'm your host, Andrew Taslow, and if you are looking to make better bets as an angel investor, subscribe for more at thediligentobserver.substack.com.